So I don't know about you, but recently I've been getting this sort of urge or this itch to create. And for the longest time, I've always wanted to write stories. What I took up in college was basically literature because I wanted to learn how to write a compelling story or short story or novel. Basically, my biggest dream was to become a novelist. And for the longest time, I've put off this dream and this passion in exchange for trying to survive in this economy and in this society. And because basically I'm a husband and a father, and it's my responsibility to provide for the family, to make sure that my child gets a good education. And so that's what I've been focusing on for the past how many years now. But it wasn't always like this, of course. There was a time like after college where I was looking for work and I ended up basically freelancing. So I got some freelancing gigs. Then I also started a blog because during that time I was also listening to a lot of podcasts. And in these podcasts, and this was the time back then when podcasts weren't really a thing. They weren't as popular as they are now. And so I would listen to these podcasts and I would glean some nuggets of wisdom of how to start an online business, how to become an influencer before there were even influencers back then. And I made my attempt at it as well. I built up a blog, and in that blog, I interviewed local artists. So these are visual artists. Because basically, me and my brother back then wanted to create a comic or a comic book series. And so I wrote up a script, he did the art, and we started self-publishing this comic book series and then selling them at local comic conventions. And whenever I was at these conventions, I saw the amount of talent that a lot of Filipino artists had. And, they weren't getting the attention that I felt that they deserved. And so I decided to start this blog and create a space where they could share their work as well as their creative process. So the interviews I did with these artists were mainly about how or their process and how they would create their art and the struggles that they went through as artists. Whether that was visibility, whether that was in the creation itself, how they deal with creative blocks or writer's blocks. And I would post these on my blog and some people would read them. I wasn't able to get it to the point where it became massively successful, just a little bit. But doing that work really helped fulfill me in a way, even though I wasn't really earning a lot from it. I mean, I was figuring out how to monetize it. I was figuring out how to get traffic. I used Facebook ads to drive traffic to the website and basically everything. I did posts on social media. And I enjoyed it thoroughly, but I guess it just wasn't all it was cracked up to be. But during that time, while I was freelancing, I also wrote short stories. And I was able to get a few short stories published in local anthologies here in the Philippines. And this was a big thing for me as well because the editors of these anthologies were multi-award winning writers who won the most prestigious awards, at least here locally. But they've also built a name for themselves on an international scale as, Filipino writers. And back then, I had a lot of time because I was freelancing that pursuing my passion helped keep me sort of uplifted because one way or another, I was still able to feed my soul, so to speak. And then now recently, with all the changes that have been happening economically and technologically, now there's AI and everything, and it's taking over the job of a writer in most cases. And then so while I was freelancing, I started learning about social media. And during the time, a relative of mine wanted help with their marketing, particularly with social media. And he asked if I was interested to help them out. And maybe test the theories that I've learned only through podcasts and YouTube videos. And so I agreed, yeah, so why not? I mean, a great opportunity to learn about marketing. And so I jumped on that, and that's where my marketing journey or career path began. Eventually, after several years, I was able to build a good enough portfolio and experience to be able to branch out of just my relative's business. And that's when I got into a digital marketing agency. And the difference I had with that digital marketing agency and with the work for my uncle was that I wasn't exactly tied to a schedule. It wasn't exactly a 9 to 5. I still had the freedom of time to do what I want when I wanted, and I was able to work whenever I wanted as well. So basically, I was working from home before working from home became a thing. But then, of course, the demands of family, of being a husband and a father, increased, and so I wanted to, I had to, at least, find a way to earn more money doing what I was doing, marketing basically. And so this is where I got into a digital marketing agency. Now, this one was a regular job, your regular 9 to 5, or rather for me, it was 6 to 3 because I was working for an Australian client, and they're about 2 hours ahead, 2 to 3 hours ahead. And so I was doing their marketing for them, particularly their social media. And it was at this time that, I got less time for myself. There was less freedom of time because I was stuck in the office. And, I was doing all this work. And sometimes, even when I didn't have a lot on my plate, and I couldn't really do anything outside of the work scope because they were paying for my time, right? And so this is where I started chasing the money, basically. And don't get me wrong, I enjoyed the creative side of marketing. And that for me was fun in a way, but not exactly fulfilling, if you get what I mean. I mean, it's a fun to a certain extent, but it's not what you want to do. And I just kept at it. I went from that job to another job, which paid a lot more money. And now I was doing SEO, writing articles basically for businesses. And these businesses range from health and wellness, retail, fashion, accessories, construction, interior design, automobiles, car parts, and car customizations, all of that. So it was a wide range of stuff. And what was hard about that time was basically that I was writing, but I wasn't writing what I wanted to write. And the longer that I kept at these jobs, the more difficult life seemed to be. Of course, don't get me wrong. I love my wife, I love my kid. In fact, they're probably the things that kept me sane during this period, even as I was being burnt out from work. But then, ChatGPT happened, and eventually I was let go. And this began my sort of dark night of the soul. I figured even if I was let go, I could easily find a job with my skills and my experience. But no, by that time, everyone had basically caught up to me. I mean, it was great early on because I was one of the first people who really started getting into social media marketing before there were social media marketers. And now everybody's doing it. So it's hard to compete with all of those people. And a lot of them are much younger than I am. And so I couldn't get a job. All my applications sort of fell flat and nothing happened with them. Sometimes I guess either I'm overqualified, I'm too old, I'm too expensive, all of that. And of course, it hurt my self-esteem to a certain degree that despite all my years of experience, I wasn't good enough for these companies, or I wasn't the one they were looking for. And so it came to a point where I just decided, enough is enough. Maybe it's time I did something for myself for a change. And that's what I'm doing now. That's what this channel is about. And I've also done several other efforts to really focus more on myself. Because, moving forward, when you think about it, when you think about AI and all its developments, eventually what they want really is to replace all most of us at least with AI, because AI is cheaper. AI does what they want when they want it. They can control AI to a certain degree, but humans, they can't control that same degree. And I think this is the time really when we are forced to really focus on ourselves. You know, it's time to stop running from your creative calling, because at the end of the day, that's all you have left. Whatever your calling is. Calling used to be attributed to spiritual practice. So they call people who were called to be priests or pastors. And when you think about it, a calling is really just basically an urge of your soul to do something that's meant for you. And so, because I've chosen to start focusing on myself and on what I want to do, I've been writing short stories again, and I've been submitting them to some online magazines. I've also been writing more articles and blogs about the things that I want to write, whether that's film, anime, video games, and things have started to look up. Our life isn't as depressing as it was when I was stuck working in a 9 to 5. And so I've been getting my groove back, so to speak. Or I could feel my groove coming back. And I think that's what we all should start doing. Stop running from this calling to create. Because for me, I believe that we're all creators in our own way. We're all born creative. It's just that it's been snuffed out by so many things, whether that's your parents, whether that's your school who told you that you're not creative, who told you that your work is not worth anything. But really, when you think about it, we're all born with that creative drive, inkling, in whatever it is we're passionate about. It doesn't have to be writing, it doesn't have to be art. It's just what you want to do. It could be you're an inventor. You're a physicist and you want to invent things that would benefit the world. That's your passion. And that's all right. Go after it. Go chase it. Now is the time, because eventually we may not have anything left in terms of what we know as job security or even as employment. Eventually, I think we're going the route of everybody will have to sort of fend for themselves. Maybe there will be what people are calling universal basic income, because AI has taken over all the jobs. So now we're just we're just sustained by a basic income, and then maybe we'll just be left to do whatever you want. And then, if you want to have more than just your basic income, you'll have to build something for yourself that rests on who you are and what you're passionate about. And so I think now's the time to get started, Now, while things are still in flux, while things are still changing and moving, because later on it might be more difficult, or later on you might have a tougher time. And so I think now's the time to get started. It's time to stop running and it's start chasing your dreams. I'm doing it, and I think you should start doing it as well.